Welcome, my dear friends. It's good to see you. Glad you dropped by. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and general enjoyer of big brain activities. On this channel, I perform dramatic readings of my stories. I provide reviews of role-playing games, and I talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're going to explore another short story from Memphis Dirty, Tales from the Dirty South, a collection of 9 short stories from me and a few other authors that was written in 2012, back when I lived in Tennessee. But today, we're not going to be going over one of my stories. No. We're going to explore a story written by my friend Joseph Tate. Now, we worked together, we lived together for a little while, and Joseph is a former Marine, where I'm previously from the Army. And this story, I want to think that this is dedicated to all of our fellow service members, past and present. And so we'll get into this. Restraint by Joseph Tate. I don't know why we need all this, I told Mark, the male nurse on duty. You guys know I'm easygoing. When was the last time anybody had to lay hands on me? Mark nodded, the crow's feet around his eyes crinkling in mild humor. You know the drill, man. Here, every patient gets the same 4-star treatment. Mark was a good guy. Under different circumstances, we would have been fast friends. But not now. Now, regardless of when or where we met, I would always be one of his ex-patients from the Memphis VA hospital psychiatric ward. Just do me one favor, man, I said to Mark. Try to act like you don't enjoy it so much. Mark's smile spread from his eyes to the rest of his face. Yeah, he said, smirking. Putting your big ass in leather restraints is my idea of a dream come true. It was Tuesday, and Tuesday was electroconvulsive therapy day. My psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel K. Bruler, entered the quiet room as Mark finished putting me in restraints. Dr. Bruler never seemed to be around unless there was a male orderly present. I was tied down, or both. I don't know what the deal with Dr. Bruler was, but I do know that he reminded me of one of those guys we'd get in Vietnam. The kind of fucking new guy who everybody just knew was going to get lots and lots of people killed, unless we got him killed first. Seems like our patient is ready for a little electric sunshine, Dr. Bruler said. His smile was so fake, so obviously put on that I don't think even he believed it. Dr. Bruler seemed to notice more of an improvement from every Tuesday's round of shock treatments than I did. But I guess my last name didn't have enough letters behind it to get a fair vote. Mark inspected the restraints in silence. He kept busy fiddling with the restraints. I'm sure Dr. Bruler had given him orders to not leave us alone together. I liked Mark, so I didn't press the issue. Today is a bit of an anniversary for you, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Bruler said, drawing my attention back to him. He had this habit of looking just past you as he spoke, as if there was something just off your shoulder, much more fascinating than you. You are due for your 24th ECT. That's a facility record. Dr. Bruler sniffed, his eyes darting around the room as he edged just a bit closer to the door. I know that, Doc. Just like you know, my name is Otis, not Mr. Johnson. Dr. Bruler ignored my calling him Doc, something I did as often as possible, knowing that he hated to be called that, and continued speaking as if I had not actually said anything. We've only been doing ECT for 3 years, since 1978, in fact. Most patients' benefits are achieved within just a few sessions. Unfortunately, your symptoms have been extremely persistent. I made it a point to speak to Dr. Bruler as little as possible, partly because I had nothing to say to the bastard, partly because he called flashbacks persistent symptoms, but mostly because it made him uncomfortable. "So what, Doc?" I said. "About another dozen or so ought to finish what the Viet Cong couldn't? After all, what's a little shock therapy between friends?" As I spoke, Dr. Bruler's left hand eased out of his perfectly pressed lab coat and touched the edge of the door. "I'll see you shortly. First thing. Tails of his lab coat flying, Dr. Bruler turned and fled the room. The entire time that Dr. Bruler and I were talking, or rather Dr. Bruler was talking at me, Mark had been quietly loosening my restraints. He'd left me enough room on the stretcher to turn on my side. Mark knew how sick I got after the electroconvulsive therapy. "Ready to ride?" he asked. Mark treated me like a kid brother, even though I was almost 15 years older than him, and at 6'4" I was almost 10 inches taller and at least 100 solid pounds heavier. "Home, Mark," I said, and away we went. Unlike other nurses, Mark kept quiet as he rolled me down the winding halls of the Memphis Veterans Hospital to my weekly ECT appointment. After all, I was about to have my memories literally shocked out of my brain, so the last thing I wanted to do was chat or be chatted at. When we pulled up just outside the ECT room, Mark stopped the stretcher and came around to the side. "What do you want for afterwards?" he asked. This was another reason I liked Mark so much. He didn't make me ask him. "Can you get Diana Ross to swing by my room?" I said, keeping my face straight. "Same request as last week," Mark said, smiling. "Guess not, then," I said. "If you can't get Diana Ross, I guess a lunch tray will have to do." Mark nodded. His thinning hair shook and glinted in the fluorescent light, which put off an acrid smell like something being welded. "You got it, man," he said, as he pushed me into the ECT room. ECT is rough. It's rough on me, and I did 2 tours in Vietnam. I was captured and tortured, and I had to crawl through 20 miles of jungle to escape. I'd never admit it because Marines aren't supposed to be scared of anything, but I am afraid of that room. Really afraid. The IV isn't the problem. Shots and needles don't bother me. There's just something about ECT that gets to me. I tried to tell Dr. Bruler that the room smells. I told him that every time I'm in that room, I can smell the jungle, which wouldn't be so bad, except that I smell jungle in Tennessee, and that's just retarded. But it's not just the jungle I smell. It's the craziest thing. The smell of overwhelming green, or nature growing unchecked, is so fucking strong. There's a hint of carbon, like rounds have recently been fired, and a whiff of something else. Something I know, but can't fully recall. Something dark and moist, like cold rain on a deep winter night, but darker and intentional. I know it's crazy, but I sure as shit can smell that rain every time I get ECT. Just before the technician starts the shock treatments, I hear the first raindrops of what may be either a sprinkle or a monsoon just before they hit the canopy. The thing is that in Nam, rain brought bad things, really bad things. Sometimes when I wake up from ECT, I feel the raindrops on my skin. I know it's not raining. I mean, my brain knows, but still, for just a few minutes, I'm back with my recon team in the Annam Highlands, laying on my back, letting the rain wash the darkness from my soul. And those few minutes after I first come out of ECT, it's still 1968. At least, for me it is. "Count backward from 100, the technician said. I could already feel whatever he had given me hitting my system. 99, 98, 97, I began, and then the ground fell away from the world. The rain in Vietnam doesn't always fall. Sometimes, quite often in fact, it drives itself into the ground as if in a hurry to get back to heaven. This was that kind of rain. Sergeant Johnson and his fire team, being Corporals Evans and Mitchell, Private First Class Moyle, Private Schallenberger, and their guide, a Montagnard native named Trang, were deep in the Annam Highlands, tracking the movements of a Viet Cong patrol said to have set up operations in the area. The fire team followed barely visible tracks for weeks through jungle so dense, so isolated that no non-Vietnamese eyes had probably ever seen it. Sergeant Johnson held up his fist, palm out, and his team stopped. They had been close, really close to the Viet Cong platoon until 2 days ago when the rain came. Corporals Evans and Mitchell and Trang slid through the muck to Sergeant Johnson's position. "Any sign of him?" Sergeant Johnson asked. He liked Trang. Trang was one of those people who could look you right in the eye, smile, and spill your guts on the ground before you even knew you'd been cut. That was one of Sergeant Johnson's favorite personality traits for a soldier under his command to have. "No Hein," Trang said. Trang insisted on calling each of the team members Vietnamese names. Sergeant Johnson was Hein, or older brother. "We fuck bad tonight," Trang continued. It wasn't Trang's mutilation of the English language that made him hard to listen to. It was his love of profanity. "What the hell does that mean, Trang?" Corporal Mitchell asked through clenched teeth. "You know why, Diane," Trang said. "We bad fuck every night." "Seriously, though," Corporal Mitchell added, "we can't just crawl around the entire jungle till we find him. Come on, Sarge. Let's make camp and wait out the rain." Sergeant Johnson nodded. Not that any of them could see him do it with no moonlight. "Trang," Sergeant Johnson said, "can you find us a room with a view?" Trang's broad brown face split with a wide smile. "Sure enough, Hein. I find. And I find nice spot for you all, and something special for Trang's special friend, Sang." Trang and Mitchell, or Sang, as Trang called him, hated each other. In different circumstances, one or both of the men would already be dead. "My fucking name is Terry James fucking Mitchell, Trang." Mitchell hated all things Vietnamese. He was one of those guys who came to Vietnam young. Too young. And full of promise. Every day spent here. He died a little inside. "Hi, people," Sergeant Johnson said. "Time to get the machine moving. Mitch, you take point. Evans, get the rear. And Evans..." Sergeant Johnson paused, making sure he had Evans's full attention. "Don't get left behind this time, all right?" They all liked Corporal Kevin Evans the way you like a kid brother that just can't keep up. Try as hard as he can, Evans was always a step behind. Trang's Vietnamese name for Evans, Pham, suited Evans's personality just right. Evans was better suited to tilling fields and mucking through a Turin Nam. But there was no one on the team who was a better shot. In spite of not looking it, Evans was smart. He spoke fluent Vietnamese, and he knew that Trang's name for Mitchell meant a person who acted like he was upper class, which, in fact, Mitchell was, and that Trang meant it as an insult. Evans smiled his aw shucks smile and slid back towards the two privates. "You all right, Mr. Johnson?" the technician asked. "Sure. Fine," was all I could squeeze through my tortured throat. "Is it over?" I asked the technician. "No, sir. We had some difficulty keeping you under. I'm going to need you to relax a bit, Mr. Johnson. Can you do that for me?" I looked at the wires hooked to my bare chest, the leather straps on my wrists and ankles, and the IV pumping God knows what into my veins. "Sure, buddy. Relaxation in 5, 4, 3... "The problem with ambushes," Evans said, "is that you don't know they're coming." The team was taking heavy fire from both sides. After tracking the Viet Cong platoon for almost 3 weeks, they'd walked right into an ambush. Sergeant Johnson wasn't in a talkative mood as he was busy trying to simultaneously fire left and right with his M60. "Get your ass down and your muzzle up, Evans," Mitchell shouted. For a time, the only sounds the team made were with their weapons, Sergeant Johnson, with the M60, spoke loud and often. Mitchell, with an M16, spoke in deadly spurts. Trang, with the AK-47, sounded muted and foreign, but intense. Evans, with the sniper rifle, spoke infrequently, but every time he uttered a sound, a body dropped to the jungle floor. The two privates Johnsoned the tree line. Instead of firing their weapons, they did nothing except throw grenades like baseballs of death deep into the trees. Sergeant Johnson knew that, like all the previous firefights he'd been in, there had come a point where one of three things was going to happen. Charlie was going to get dead, his team was going to get dead, or someone was going to have to run like hell. Sergeant Johnson didn't think that tonight was the night for his team to count Viet Cong bodies. "Fellas," Sergeant Johnson said, "time to get to getting." Sergeant Johnson knew that the Viet Cong platoon was split on at least two sides, and he had to pick a clear path for the team. He had no way of knowing whether or not he was running into the teeth of the enemy. So they ran, Sergeant Johnson leading the way, firing his M60 from his hip, John Wayne style, and running for all he was worth. The rain kept the smell of weapons fire close to the ground. I lay there, feeling the rain drum on my skin, smelling fear and death, and hearing my blood pound in my ears. I was, for the first time in 18 months I'd been in Nam, scared. I tried to move, but I was tied down. When had I been captured? "Just relax, take it easy," a voice said. I'd heard that some of the Viet Cong spoke perfect English. I kept my eyes closed tight. If I see him, if I see his face, he'll have to kill me to protect his cover. "Where's my team?" I asked. I hadn't gone down by myself. Mitchell and Trang were right behind me, firing like hell when I took off running, and I could hear the little booms from the privates' grenades. "Your team?" the interrogator asked. I had either been captured by myself, or this commie bastard was already beginning the psychological torture. "Just relax here a minute. I'll be right back," the interrogator said. I knew from my POW training that the best time to escape was immediately after capture. I crept my eyes open just enough to see him leave the room, probably to get more interrogators. Luckily, my restraints were loose enough so I could turn on my side. I used the available space to thrash myself whip-like and snap the restraints. Once I was free, restraints trailing, I sprang off the cot. I knew that the noise would bring trouble. For some reason, I was barefoot with only a pair of thin pants on. I hid behind the door, scrunched down. The stench of death mingled with ozone and something else, something antiseptic. Blood still pounding in my ears. I crouched and waited, repeating my team's names over and over. "Evans, Trang, Mitch, all gone, gone," I mumbled. Only had to wait a few minutes before the interrogator came back into the room. He walked right past me, saw the empty cot, and before he could turn around, I used one of the straps to snap his neck. It was a fast death, better than he deserved. I felt a push from behind as another Viet Cong tried to tackle me. This guy was small, light. I reached back, grabbed what was left of his hair, and tossed him against the wall. He hit hard, bounced off the wall, and slammed to the floor. He started to rise to his knees. "Don't speak, you fuck!" I yelled. "You bastards killed them all, even Evans!" The guy was scared, real scared. "No, Otis," he said. "It's me." Before he could finish, my hands were around his throat. "Viet Cong lies! There's nothing you can say that can bring them back, is there?" And then I snapped his neck. "That's for Trang, you fuck!" I said, then spat on his dead body. I figured that I'd only have a short time before all hell broke loose. I slipped into the hallway, padding quietly. I was going to have to get back to headquarters and let them know about this place. None of our recon had reported that the Viet Cong had anything as sophisticated as this. I wandered the halls, lost for what seemed like hours. After a time, the smell of the jungle began to diminish. I no longer felt the rain on my skin, and I could hear again. Tired, I slipped into a supply closet to rest. I slept for a time, fitfully, My dreams were of violent episodes from Vietnam, mostly. My dreams were of an ambush on a hillside deep in the NM Highlands. Times I don't want to remember, but can't forget. Restraint by Joseph Tate. Well, it wasn't a pleasant story. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you enjoyed it for what it was. And I would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. So please share those with us in the chat. And if you did enjoy it, well, I also enjoy people liking and subscribing, so feel free to do that. I thank you for your time. And as we, dear friends, are soon to part, I wish you nothing but the best.